So we're going to start with a butterfly. We just take the soles of our feet together and we push those feet out. So not this, which is what everyone wants to do. They want to bring their heels in, drop their knees down, and come forward. That you're going to feel that here, and that's a good stretch. It's just not the one we're going for today. So feet out, and then we just nice and relaxed come forward. And you want to let your back round. And as much as possible, you just let gravity take over and pull you forward and down. If you feel this is a little too intense for you, and it might be, you can place support under the knees, under the forearms, under the forehead. When I say support, generally that's going to mean yoga blocks or a bolster, okay? But you can use other things that you might have at home. And we're going to be here for a full 5 minutes. So again, exercising joints, a lot of the time, it's not so much about how much effort you're making or how much stress you're putting, it's how long you're doing it. So a very gentle stress over a prolonged period of time is what the doctor ordered. It's what we want here, okay? So we're already a minute in. We'll be here for another 4 minutes or so. Okay, so let's come on up, and then we'll transition into a very similar posture, targeting the same area, just slightly more intense. Now, if this is not for you, because it's more intense, then just repeat this butterfly pose. And you can play around with the foot position. You can change that a little bit if you want. Otherwise, legs straight, and we come forward. That's called a caterpillar. Very similar. Again, it may not feel very different for you. What is different is we have taken up the slack in the hamstrings, and that generally does not allow the pelvis to tilt forward quite as easily. And so that creates a more aggressive angle here, a more aggressive stretch. And this is what we're trying to target here, is decompressing this part of our back. And if you're wondering, why would you need that? Generally, if you work at a desk, if you sit for any length of time during the day, you're compressing this. When you sit in a chair, it's about 4 times more compressive than standing is. Now, I think as we've discussed in the past, standing isn't the answer either, because then you start to get things like varicose veins and whatever it is. There really isn't a position that you should spend 6 or 8 hours in. There just really isn't one. So again, a standing desk can be helpful if you can change it, right? If you can change up your position. And that's really the key. So if you can work from a laptop, if you have a standing desk, you move it up and down. If you can move the laptop to different positions in your house, if you can maybe lay on your belly and do work in that position, sit up part of the time, stand part of the time. This is really what we want, the variety of movement. Some of you have maybe heard me say in the past that sitting on the floor can be better for you than sitting in a chair. And part of the reason I think that this is, generally populations that sit on the floor are healthier for longer. So, they get into old age, they can still get up and down off the floor, their joints are better, there's not as much of the hip replacement and spine fusion and all of that stuff. I suspect part of the reason for this is it's more uncomfortable to sit on the floor. And there isn't like one position like sitting in a chair. Part of the ill of sitting in a chair is it is comfortable. That's part of the problem. Because it's comfortable, you stay there and you sit there and you sit and you sit and you sit and you don't move. So part of the key is moving, changing position, doing something different with your body. So I recognize that most people today, they're working on, a computer of some sort. They have a workstation essentially, and they really can't leave that. But again, if you can change the position of your workstation, if you can work from a laptop, if you can change the height of your desk, maybe you can even, I've seen people who will sit in a cross-leg position, right, at their desk. So instead of having their legs dangling down, they'll sit in a cross-leg position, or they'll kneel. There are lots of different chairs that I've seen that are available for people to use. So again, these are all options that we can look at. I've also heard of people having apps and alarms on their phone or their smart watch, whatever it might be, that beeps every like 45 minutes and reminds them to get up. And this is where things like, stuff that might drive your employer crazy, going to the water cooler, getting another cup of coffee, going out for a smoke, these types of things, even though it may seem like they are inhibiting productivity, ultimately, I think our bodies need this, and our brains are part of our body. And this is something that, again, I think in the West, we've tried to sort of deny this truth, and we try and make it where, no, you just sit at this desk and you just work for 8 hours. You don't need to get up and waste time. You don't need to get a drink of water. Eat lunch at your desk. This whole idea, I think there's enough studies now that are beginning to show that this just isn't the case. Like, we're not designed to work like that. And even though you might be sitting and staring at your computer, you're not very efficient. And that's why, even like this yoga class, like, Matt, Nadia, and Michael paying for you to do this, there have been studies that have shown doing that actually can increase productivity. So it's counterintuitive. We think, no, just sit down and do your work. But there's a point at which the system just can't do anymore. We may want to, we can sit there, but this isn't that efficient. It's not that creative. It's not going to really work optimally. So we need to give this a break. All right, let's go ahead and come on out of that, and we'll relax back onto our back for a little bit. And just take it easy, feel the rebound. Good, let's bring our legs in, we'll give them a little squeeze, and we just shake it off with a little bit of movement. Okay, so we targeted the back of the spine. We essentially exercised the back of the spine. You can think of that like bicep or tricep curls. Biceps are in the front of your arm, triceps are in the back. So, we have different muscle groups. But today we're not working muscle groups, we're just moving, we're working the joints in the spine. But there's still different sections, and so we need to do different poses for the different sections. So let's work on the side of the spine next. So to do this, we use a banana. We're going to move our hips over to the right edge of the mat, and we just take our legs out straight, and you take your left leg to the left. How far exactly is, up to you. And we cross that right ankle over. You may already begin to feel the stretch. This is where we're wanting to feel it, right in here along our side, okay? And so from there, I can reach up, grab my right wrist, and pull over. And you may want to actually sort of scoot over to the left here. So move your head and shoulders over. And now we're going for, again, a nice stretch here in this part of the body. So this is an interesting stretch because it most people have enough tension in this part of their body that they're going to feel a muscular stretch. In the forward fold, at least some people don't have very much tension. I think a lot of people actually don't have very much tension in the back of their body. That's not to say you don't feel tension in your back, especially your upper back, like your shoulders and your neck. Okay, so there can be a difference between feeling tension and actually having tension there. So for most people, when they fold forward, they don't feel a stretch. They feel maybe a little bit of stress in their spine, but they don't feel a stretch, not like this when we move sideways. So moving sideways for most people is fundamentally, there's way more tension than in folding forward, at least in the torso. I really need to clarify that, because in the legs, it's maybe the opposite, where moving your leg to the side is relatively easy compared with keeping your leg straight and folding over it. So this is a fundamental difference that we see here. Even though we're targeting the spine, most of us are going to feel a muscular stretch. And this brings us to a very important thing to understand about stretching and exercising our joints. And that is that we're going to stretch and release tension in that part of our body that has the most tension in it. So in other words, if there's very little muscular tension, then the stress of a posture can easily move into our joints. If there's a lot of muscular tension, then we must first release the muscular tension before we really are going to create any significant change in the joints. So for most people, these sideways movements are like that. It's unlikely we're actually creating much stress in the joints themselves. We're much more stretching our obliques and intercostal muscles. But this is fine. Even though our ultimate goal is to try and target the spine, we can never do that without first working through this muscular tension. And it's very important to release muscular tension from your body. So I have another flow that's very similar to this one. It's really only, I think, one posture that's different, one set that's different. But it's called the torso flow. And we essentially are doing many of the same stretches here, just a slight change of emphasis. But whether it's the muscles of the torso or it's the joints of the spine, the work is almost identical. Very, very similar what we're trying to do with either flow. We got less than a minute left here. Okay, so let's move over to the other side. And take your time. And you may want to take a moment just to feel both sides. So let me do that and report. Do I feel a difference? I definitely do. So my right side, it's more tingly. It's more alive. It's more vibrant. It feels lighter. This side feels heavier or darker or, duller. I really don't have a better way of describing it than that. All right, let's move over to the other side. And then again, legs and then arms. And this is called banana pose. So again, I think feeling that we may not think that's very significant or important. But what if that feeling of vibrancy and aliveness is not just a feeling? What if when we do these stretches, we're actually making those tissues in those parts of our body more alive. We're actually stimulating them to be more alive. And this is what the yogis have long maintained and said, is that's essentially exactly what you're doing with these postures, with the stretches, with the power yoga, with everything that we do, is we are stimulating, we're targeting different areas in our body. And what I love about a well-designed yoga program, and I have to say that because there are some that I don't think are very well designed. But a well-designed program, it will target pretty much every nook and cranny of your body sooner or later. And this is where, I can't see you practice online. That's not the way we usually do it anyway. But when I teach live in person, I see what people can and can't do easily. And I've been blessed. I'm not the most flexible person by far. If you think that I'm flexible, you should see some of the students in my classes. They are way more flexible than I am. So if you're looking at me and thinking, oh wow, look at what he can do, trust me, there are people who can do more than I can. But again, I think as you've heard me say, it's not the point. The point is when I try and do something like take my leg and put it over my shoulder and I can't, I'm actually getting into a part of my body that probably hasn't been used in a long time, because most of us don't often try and put our leg over our shoulder. Whatever it is we're doing, if we're trying to balance on our hands and do a crow pose, again, this is just not something we do very often. Now that means we also need to be cautious, because if we are too gung-ho and too aggressive, then we easily hurt ourselves, because those areas that we don't use very often, they tend to get weak. And so this can happen in yoga, and it's unfortunate when it happens. But the important thing to understand is not using that area, saying, well, I'm not going to do yoga so that I don't use parts of my body that are weak. That area is just going to get weaker. And I shouldn't just say weak, inflexible as well, right? Immobile. So some people, who work desk jobs, they don't move a lot. They spend years doing that, and then they get to yoga in their 40s or 50s or even 60s. And they come into the studio and they start practicing, and they're asked to put their arms over their heads for the first time in a really long time, and to hold them there. And they find like they can't. You see students like that. Their arms are like that. They're bent. They can't do that anymore. Okay, so the important thing to understand about our body is it really is a use it or lose it thing. And the way modern life is constructed is we have a very small, limited range in which we need to move. There are many movements that the body is capable of and that help keep the body vital and strong and flexible and alive. There are many movements that you will just not encounter during your day. An average American, person's day, you're just not going to encounter it. And that can go for days, weeks, months, years, decades, even a lifetime. And that's fine and good, except, again, those areas are getting weak. They're losing vitality. Again, we can kind of feel it when we work a part of our body. It feels more vital, more alive. Okay, let's unwind from this one. Okay, we bring our legs in, give them a little squeeze and shake it off. Yeah, and exactly how you do this just depends on what you're feeling and your unique body. And then to come up to seated, we'll use the hinge to help stabilize everything. So as usual, hands under the hips, palms down. Legs straight unless there's pain in your back, and then you're going to bend those knees until that pain subsides. Lift the head and neck, deep breath. Exhale, lower those legs, and then hinge on up. Okay, so before we tackle our next set, which are back bends, we'll come into a tabletop. Let's do a little bit of the marauding bear. Again, this really kind of tells us what's going on with our body. So I feel a little bit of stiffness there in my back. But as you know, I've had some back issues recently, and my back is doing much, 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 much better. So relatively speaking, I'm happy. A little bit of stiffness, I'll deal with it. I'll take it. After that, we can tuck our toes, do a little bit of the down dog here. And again, exactly what you do just depends on what you're feeling in your body. Again, these movements stimulate the tissues as well. So, you know, doing something like this with my foot, that's something that I may not get with a stiff modern shoe, right? Is that movement. Okay, let's come forward onto our belly. This is a Sphinx. Okay. And we have the same options, Sphinx or Seal, which is arms straight or bent, okay, legs together or apart, shoulders depressed or relaxed, head held up, dropped forward, and dropped back. So again, for a while there, I was doing the more aggressive straight arm, Seal, instead of the Sphinx. Today I'm going to stick with Sphinx. Again, I recently have hurt my back. Again, I don't know if that was a new injury or it was a re-injury. Very hard to tell. But I'm very happy with the way that I've recovered from that so far. I'm doing much, much, much better. So it may be something like a chronic back injury that will get aggravated by certain things, and then it will subside, and it's something that you just have to kind of manage. I really don't know. And to be honest with you, I'm not really interested in going and finding out, getting an MRI or anything like that. Generally not interested in most of the solutions that modern medicine has for things like that. Of course, if it were something that were like a chronic pain or something like that, then I might be more interested in that. But if it's something that I can handle on my own, then I'm not too interested in what they have to say. It's my understanding that the board that recommends certain kinds of treatments to doctors, I understand that they're actually reviewing right now data for back surgery, and they're considering just removing it. The reason for that, someone was telling me the other day that I think it's 5 years out, the results for whether you had surgery or not are basically the same. And that a lot of people immediately after back surgery, they feel better, but they were saying that maybe that has more to do with the anesthesia and all of the other things that have been done to them than the actual surgery. So again, we live in a modern age, and the way that doctors and scientists decide, what to recommend in terms of health, they have their methods and things by which they will make recommendations or not, but nothing is set in stone when it comes to science and medicine. So if you really understand the way these things work, a new finding can completely change what is recommended in terms of treatment. So one treatment that was considered the cutting edge and high tech and all the rage, in time can be proven to be harmful. And this isn't this isn't conjecture on my part. This has happened. And so this is pretty much true of everything that we do. What I like about some of these ancient methods, that again, if we're raised in the West with the scientific method and we think that that's foolproof, it's not, I guarantee you, and anyone who understands it's not foolproof. But if we think that, oh, well, science always tells the truth and we can always trust exactly what science says and we should just follow science. Again, there are different studies. They can come out with different results. Some studies are very well vetted and there have been peer review results that have been done, but some studies aren't like that. There's been one study done and it wasn't even done very well. But sometimes the news, sometimes an agency like the CDC or the WHO or whatever big agency, the medical boards, they will pick up on a study and then they will just use that to decide policy and things like that. So it's important to understand that, and I say these things because these are things that I thought in the past. So I'm really just kind of talking to my old self when I give these talks, things that I used to think. So it's maybe less foolproof than many of us think it is, the medical system and the whole scientific, the way that they come up with these results. Scientists are human, doctors are human, medical professionals are human. The board of a giant medical organization or the head of a government's medical agency, they're human and they're fallible. And the people that did the studies are human and fallible, and all the way down the run, all the way down the line. So, we're not necessarily getting something that's foolproof. And I think a lot of people go to their doctor with that sort of attitude that whatever the doctor says is, that's the end all and be all that there is to say about a certain subject. All right, let's come on out of this. Now, when I talk about that, I definitely want to be clear that I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to your doctor or that anyone is out to get you. I'm not talking about conspiracy theories here. I'm not talking about, evil people trying to manipulate you or make a lot of money. Some of that might happen, but that's certainly not what I'm talking about. What I am talking about is these ancient systems that yoga come from. These have been around for thousands of years. So even though maybe they haven't used the scientific method, if something they were doing were truly harmful, we probably know about it. Probably at some point over thousands of years, someone would have realized. And this is where I'm saying in my lifetime, there have been methods and things that have been recommended that have changed in my lifetime, right? And I'm 48, so in 48 years, there have been things that have been recommended. Oh, you should do this. This is good for your health. And we did those things. And then later they say, oh, actually no. So again, thousands of years of yoga and these methods and versus very short amount of time for us, most of the things that we go by. All right, let's go ahead and switch into our next posture. This one you need to be careful with, okay? So if this one is not for you today, no problem. Repeat the last pose, okay? Just repeat it. You can do it a little differently, maybe go a little deeper depending on how you feel. So this one, we sit on our heels or between the heels or on a block. Any of those are fine. The feet and ankles often are a problem, so putting a blanket or something underneath them might be a good idea for you. Now the feet can point back or out to the side. Some people can only do back. So if this makes you cringe, then don't try it. It means that your tibia doesn't give you that much rotation. This is coming from what's called tibial rotation. Okay, it's this bone rotating. It's not from here. It's from here at the knee. Okay, so I have a lot. Some people have like almost zero. It also comes from rotation here, what's called internal rotation. So it's rotation at the hip and at the knee. Combination lets me do that. And some people don't have this, some people don't have that, some people don't have either. Or very little. I won't say they don't have any. Okay. The other area that's trouble is the knees. So sitting higher, this is called knee flexion. And when you sit higher, you reduce knee flexion. And knee flexion is often what causes pain in the knee. So sitting higher, and then also knees wider. Now the reason why that's helpful is because there's a myofascial line that goes down the front of the thigh. And the kneecap is inside of that. And so when your legs are together, you may not know this, but you're actually putting more pull on that. When your knees are apart, it's those tissues are relaxed. So this is contrary to what a lot of yoga teachers will tell you. Oh, knees together, knees straight, knees down, all that kind of stuff. Well, actually, it's not the way the body is designed. Okay, so make sure your knees and ankles and feet are at least okay. And then check your thighs. Do you feel stretch in your thighs? If you do, then I want you to stay right here. That's good enough for today, okay? That's the start of this pose, is stretching out those thighs. So again, this is an area I taught last night at a studio, and I taught this pose, and there were several people who they could not basically come back. They had so much tension here. There's a gentleman there. It's very often a guy, and he looked very fit. So he probably is very athletic. Maybe he goes to the gym and works out. He does squats. Well, that's creating a lot of tension in the front of his thigh. And he probably doesn't think about stretching. He looked like he was there with his girlfriend. So his girlfriend probably dragged him to yoga. Now, I was talking about a lot of this same stuff. Hopefully, you know, maybe that was a wake-up call for him. I don't know. We'll see if they come back. Now, if you feel this, you don't feel the stretch, you begin lowering back, hands, elbows, crown of your head, bolster all the way back onto your back. Now, again, there's some people who are never going to do this, so I want to be very clear about that. This, what I'm doing right now, is not for everybody. I think everybody can probably get into some version of this pose, but not everyone's going to be able to lower back, nor should they. Okay, that's really, again, what's I want to really emphasize. Like I was talking earlier about feeling that vibrancy and aliveness in the body. If I'm here and I'm getting a massive stretch through the front of my thighs, that is already changing, adapting, stressing, and enlivening my body. Okay? For me, I'm not getting that. This isn't doing very much for me. This is almost like sitting in a chair for me. Like I could sit like this relatively comfortable for a good period of time because I'm not stressing anything in my body. I want to stress my body gently, safely, because it's stress that causes the adaptations, okay? And that's essentially what we're doing with exercise, is we're trying to get our body to adapt to stress. I think I've mentioned before in the class things like cold showers. And this is a thing that many people that I follow. And again, some of them are in the scientific community. So even though I want you to not just slavishly or blindly follow what is recommended, you know, by certain individuals. It's not saying don't listen to them. I'm just saying slavishly and blindly, there's a difference. right? To question, to get a second opinion, to explore alternatives. This is different than ignoring or not listening to, okay? So if you go to the doctor, they give you, something. One of the questions is it working or not? So I had a student who got COVID recently. She got sick. She went to the doctor. They gave her some antibiotics, and she wasn't getting any better. And then I had a friend who does natural healing, and she went by and dropped off some stuff for this student to help her, and she immediately started getting better. So again, I'm not saying that, it can be the reverse, okay, where someone's trying natural things and it's not working. And then they finally go and get surgery or get drugs or whatever it is, and they start getting better. I've heard both. So this is my point. It's not, natural is good and, Western is bad or anything like that. The question is it really working? Also, what are the side effects? So again, some of you know that I dated a surgeon for many, many years. Her name is Maggie, and we're still close. And, she would say to anyone who would listen, I hope I never have to have surgery as long as I live. Why would she say that? Because she could see what it does to people's bodies. Every day she would see people who had had multiple surgeries. And the more surgeries they had had, the more messed up their bodies were. Well, why was she a surgeon? Because when it is necessary, and it is necessary sometimes, it can be a game changer. Surgery can be. It can save your life, no question about it. When nothing else can, surgery will save your life, okay? And it's the same way with drugs. But her opinion, and my opinion as well, is it's overused. So there's the old saying that if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, my friend, my ex excluded, many surgeons, that's how they see things. They look for a surgical solution. And if they're asked, oh, do you want to do surgery to help with XYZ? They'll say, yes, let's do it. And they'll try, whether or not that really is the best way forward. Okay, let's go ahead and unwind from this. Take your time. Come back onto our back. Let's bring our legs in. Give them a little squeeze, shake it out. And then right knee over left, and we drop those knees down to the left. Okay, so this is twisted roots. Again, play around with leg, arm, head position to optimize what's happening here in your body. So again, I want to be clear. I'm not trying to throw shade on, doctors or the medical community. I really believe, I know many people who are in medicine, many of my students, longtime students are in medicine. So again, Maggie, she's a surgeon. I have another student named Maggie, and she's a nurse. I have another student, Deborah, who's a nurse as well. So I have another student, she's a physical therapist. So I know many people who are in that field who very much are interested, they're good people and they're interested in helping and healing people. But pretty much uniformly, they are frustrated with the system that they're working in. And they feel that the system is broken and it's not really serving the purpose that it's intended to serve. And I think this is just a fairly common occurrence when organizations get very large. They very often begin to lose sight of what's actually important. I not only think this is true of the medical system, I think it's true of a lot of other things. And again, this is just my opinion. Feel free to disagree. And I'm not trying to, again, put anybody down or criticize anybody. This is just what I see. But the medical system, our political system, the education system, and what we could call the spiritual system, I mean, religion, generally speaking, I see most religions as not actually serving the purpose of what we could call spirituality. And I say that as a spiritual teacher. So as somebody, as this being my profession, I don't think most religions are actually serving the purpose of which they purport to serve, which is generally putting us in touch with God or spirit or the unseen energies that manifest and control our physical experience, right? That's what it's about, right? Spirituality isn't about what we can see and touch and earn and change with our hands and legs and arms. Like if I can build a bridge, that's like engineering. That has nothing to do with spirituality. So spirituality is about the unseen, right? And we could say, as I often do, yoga and spirituality are really about the human heart and mind. So sure, some people who call what they do spirituality talk about things like manifestation. And I understand that and I can see that, and yes, I do think that can fall in the realm of what we would call spirituality, because when you take something and it doesn't exist and you are able to hold it in mind and then make it exist, that could be seen as a sort of a, moving from the unmanifest to the manifest. But even that, I really don't think it's not what teachers like Buddha or Jesus or Krishna or any of these really wide, that's not what they were talking about. So I don't really, that's a very modern idea, right? The secret, all these kinds of things. Oh, I'm going to teach you how to manifest whatever you want. And I'm not saying that's not valuable. I'm just saying I don't really think that's what spirituality is about. And it's also not about what most religions are concerned about, which is ethics and morality and do's and don'ts. Don't do this, do this. Don't sleep with that person, do sleep with this person. Don't eat this food, do eat that food. Don't do this action, do this action. Right? So that's what I generally call religion, which I like to differentiate from spirituality. But I think all religions started with the intent of putting people in touch with spirit, with God, with doing that. And over time, as they grow and as they age, they stop serving that function. Let's switch sides here. So the point I'm trying to make is that I think this happens, all over the place. I think it happens in yoga for sure. In fact, I think it's pretty rampant in yoga right now, where as yoga has grown, again, this is a big part of it, is the growth of an organization or a system or whatever it is. When things get to a certain size, when enough money gets involved, and I'm not saying money is evil, But it can start to distort people's perspective, where they stop making good, sensible judgments, and they start letting the dollar signs start to distort why they do what they do. So again, this has happened in churches, it's happened in yoga, it's happened in the medical field, it's happened in education, it's just in government, it just happens. It's essentially just a thing when human organizations get to a certain size. I think it just becomes a real challenge. Now, I'm not saying it can't happen that certain organizations or certain things are able to overcome these challenges. I think it's possible, but it's very challenging. So again, it's just my perspective. You're more than welcome to disagree, and I'm open to hearing other people's, perspective on such things. But I will say my opinion and perspective is informed. So again, I know teachers. I have many students who are in education, and when they hear me say these things, they don't object. They don't say, no, the education system is perfect and kids are being educated perfectly. And they see it as well. They are frustrated as well as good people who got into education with the intent of educating the young. They find the system frustrates that. Same with people I know in medicine. I'm in yoga, and I and other people who teach yoga and spirituality feel this frustration with the yoga industry, right? Even though it's not nearly as big as, say, the medical industry or the education system or our government, we still can feel it. The growing pains, as yoga grows, as more and more people become teachers or begin to make a living off of this, the true purpose can be easily lost. And you can lose sight of whether or not what you're doing is actually working or not. And so again, there are many giant organizations, very successful as organizations and institutions, but they're very unsuccessful at actually achieving what it is that their intended purpose is. And again, I don't think it takes a conspiracy theory or evildoers or ignorant people or any of those things. It's just a challenge for us as human beings. So my only point is, as an individual, you do have choices and options. And so when you go into one of these big organizations or systems, and you get the sort of routine treatment, which is probably what you're going to get, you don't have to take that laying down. You don't have to accept that. You can question, you can look for alternatives, even within the same system, right? A second opinion from a doctor. You can look for a doctor who aligns with what you are actually thinking and the type of treatment you actually want to explore. And it can be very scary, right? Because we often in our culture, again, we treat doctors kind of like priests. And same with scientists. We assume, well, they've studied so much, they know so much more than me. I'm not going to question anything they say. I don't understand what they're talking about. I'm just going to take what they say at, face value. And that's, again, how many people approach the priesthood. The priest says something, okay, that's it. That's word from God. This is the representative of God. I'm just going to go with it. But we all know, priests can rape little boys and girls. Priests are people. So, just taking that, oh, well, this person represents God, that means that they do represent God and they're infallible. This is a mistake, right? Because again, we all know priests have raped little boys and little girls and done God awful things. So this is just the human condition. And I don't think there's anybody, and myself included, I never would dream of asking a student to just take what I say blindly, not to question it and not to explore the truth of what I'm saying. My own feeling, though, is that if you look at what I'm saying and you actually look at all the evidence, I think you'll find a lot of what I say is actually accurate. All right, let's go ahead and come on out of there. So basically, this is why, that we got on this, because I was talking about my back and not really being interested in sort of plugging into the Western, getting an MRI, getting a diagnosis, finding out all this stuff. It could be helpful. Honestly, I wouldn't mind, getting more diagnostics, more testing, because that can be very valuable. I think that's one of the things that the Western system does well. But then again, what do we do with that information? I'm not necessarily going to agree with what the doctor says. I also really believe in the human body's ability to heal itself. So again, one of the things that's coming up more and more, and I was trying to mention earlier, is this idea of stressing the system. So a lot of people who are exploring reversing the aging process or halting the aging process, a lot of that comes from the way we stress the body. Intentionally and intelligently creating the right kind of stress. So things like cold showers, things like the right kind of exercise, alternating cold and heat, all of these types of things cause stress adaptations to your body. That keeps your body young and strong. All right, let's bring the legs in, give them a little squeeze, shake it out. And as usual, I recommend you just rest for the next few minutes if you got it. We're a little bit over today, so if you don't have time, I understand.